So I want you to picture 3 boxes. So some people think better if you give them a geographic or a geometric image. First box is order. That's the easiest way to start. To build a world with some meaning, some purpose, some direction, and some ground. The second box, damn it, is disorder. Ooh. That's what we're promised. Why we're signed with the cross. This is given. And then we even more foolishly say we're saved by the cross. That if you can trust the second box, you get to the third box, which is reorder. So order, disorder, reorder. Now what conservative people tend to do, and I certainly did, was spend most of the first half of life trying to secure and validate and rebuild the first box over and over and over again. What liberals and progressives and academics and smart and sophisticated people like most of us probably are, we get trapped in the second box and we become cynical. We become angry. We become split. We become disillusioned. You see, where we deeply need wisdom is how to traverse you from the first box to the third box. Reorder, or the resurrected life. Sisters and brothers, I got to say as strongly as I can, and you know it, so I probably don't need to say it to you, but there's no nonstop flight from box 1 to box 3, okay? Sorry. No way. You don't get to the resurrected life by avoiding all tragedy, absurdity, suffering, meaninglessness, death. That's where you learn everything. The easiest way, it's not the common way in the West anymore, unless you're my age. But those of you who are younger, you grew up in what we call postmodern society, where there aren't any answers, where you pretend that there's no universal truths, there's nothing that's always true. It's making it much harder to grow up without having any answers. Where, in fact, if you pretend to have an answer, you're made fun of by the time you're in college anyway. And this is what we mean by postmodernism. The easiest way to grow up is to be given enough joyful truth that your soul can be settled. Do you understand? Like I grew up believing all the stories were absolutely true. It was such a comforting way to begin. Now then I had to go to college, then I had to study theology and study philosophy and believe that all my simple answers, well, they weren't really totally true. You understand? And then I had to come back to what we call second naivete, or second innocence. Let me give you what I tell the students in the Living School. And this is a quick way of teaching. I tell them to picture 3 boxes. Have you heard me talk on this yet? Yeah. Order, disorder, reorder. All right? Reorder is the goal. There is no nonstop flight from order to reorder. You've got to go through disorder. Damn it. All right? You've got to grow up. You've got to lose your innocence. You've got to find that it isn't always true, that Catholics are all nice people and Protestants are all going to hell. You know, that gives you great comfort when you're a little Catholic boy. And then, of course, you grow up and you find, well, the Protestants thought the same thing about us. We were all going to hell. We have to start with these simple, naive things to give us initial comfort. That's the box of order. It's almost always a false order. Who of you didn't grow up? America's the best country in the world and the only country that God loves and God has shed His grace on thee. It gives Americans great comfort. But I hope you've gotten out of America at least once in your life. And though there's a lot of world beyond the United States of America, there's many people who are much nobler than we are, even in Mexico. And even in Canada, right? We got a Canadian. But a lot of people refuse that growing up. You know, I will not admit that truth. God has shed his grace on this country, and we are superior to everybody else. Those are the false comforts of box one. Now, I'm saying that in response. You still need to give that first naivete. You can't be teaching your 5-year-olds deconstructed second box blessings, you know. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and the 3 kings came, and the shepherds came, and Mary and Joseph. It's also beautiful. It's also coherent. You believe it as it is. And then grow up in time, little by little. And then, at my age, I can go right back and believe the Jesus Bethlehem story just as it was written. I don't need to deconstruct it anymore. It's filled with meaning at every level. But now it's spiritual meaning. It's not historical meaning. It's not absolute literal truth. That doesn't matter to me anymore. All I want is the spiritual meaning. But that's the gift of being a wise man or an elder. That you've gone through disorder to reorder. And reorder, we call it second naivete. Or we used to call it, second childhood. Remember, old people who you return to innocence. I'm tired of the fighting that you go through in the 30s and the 40s. All these people fighting one another. Who cares? You don't have time for it anymore. You just want the truth. And the truth becomes very simple, very clean, very clear. And you let people say it in different ways. And you don't pick fights with them. You understand? I don't need to make you say it my way to like you. I don't need you to be a white, middle-class American before I can talk to you. We don't have time for that anymore. But that was the immaturity of most religion up to now. And let's be honest. Most of the world religions, I've been picking on Christians, but most of the world religions are the same way. They're all at that tribal, clannish level of wanting everybody to conform to our way of thinking. They're still in the naive first box. Follow me? But neither do I want you to stay in the angry second box. These are most liberals and progressives and people who just argue politically correct about everything. And you just get tired of it. You really do get tired of it. So your initiation is telling you there is a third box and giving you the path to go there. You're not there yet. So don't think after you leave our 5 days at Ghost Ranch. You're in the third box. You know about it though, and that's more than most men even do.
I think that desire for order is legitimate, or it is an irrational universe. And the psyche can't live with irrationality, which is the state we're in right now as a country and as a world, reveling in untruth, irrationality, make up the story as we go along based on the ego's preferences. So we're seeing the sad fruits of the rejection of all order. But it's the old pendulum swing. We're coming from a good century of overemphasizing order. Now, the word for that was modernism, believe it or not, where we idealized there is a rational way of understanding everything, and that was the century or two where we made education the answer. Not really spirituality, but education. Just get people rational, and the world will be saved. And then again, what country has more universities than any other? Germany, my people. And where did the 2 world wars come from? So we collapsed into oh my God, you can have loads of order, but it can be extremely misused to dominate, to control, to punish, to separate, to divide in the name of what looks like reason, but is just control. So that's what led us to the thing I've just taught for the last, year and a half or so, the so-called simplistic 3 boxes: order, disorder, reorder. That you've got to put together the clash, and it is an initial clash between the first and the second box. And it's the resolution of that clash between order and seeming disorder, integrating the seeming disorder into the seemingly perfect order, that you come to a new quality of being. And I think that spiral never stops. It isn't one clash. And let me say very clearly, I think the Protestant Reformation was the first strong permission for that in Western Christianity, that we Catholics proclaimed a universal order, and you terrible Protestants came along and threw a wrench in the works and threw in a necessary disorder. But the trouble was, we set up camp there, revealed by the very word protest. Who wants to be in eternal protest stage? So then only in recent times have we been able to see the problem with that. Mm-hmm. And we're in this wonderful time of holy reconciling, to use Gurdjieff's term, where we're saying, how can we hold both in creative tension? Mm-hmm. The rule and the exception to the rule. There's very few people who do that to this day. And the big mistake in the last 50 years is that people who are liberals or progressives think they're holding together both, but they're usually not. Usually, they're still in permanent reaction against order, a permanent rebelliousness and individualism and arrogance and all the same. That's why our emphasis on contemplation is so important, because it's teaching how to do both, how to hold on to order, what's good about it, and to plant your feet there, not to be swept up in every new idea, as my generation was rightly accused of, probably, but how to then integrate disorder without riding that boat into eternity, where critique is the only name of the game. And I've seen that in the 50 years of interns and staff, where so many, as good as they are, still think what it means to do our work here is to be an eternal critic. Mm-hmm. And they don't realize this gives them moral high ground. We can dismiss your faithfulness to Catholicism or whatever it might be, Franciscanism or Jesus or the Ten Commandments, as needless order. We don't need that anymore. But they've given us nothing to substitute for it. Mm-hmm. 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 Just permanent dismissal. Yeah. I call it the demon of dismissal.
Well, and you're bringing up the role of contemplation. I wonder if I can ask you how you define contemplation and what the role of that daily practice has in what you just described in that order, disorder, reorder process of embracing change and dynamism, even as we think about the alternative orthodoxy.
Let me use that one that I used at the very beginning, and you've heard me use before, from a Carmelite. A long, loving look, L-L-L, at the real with a big R. That's good. And maybe the most important word is to look at it until you can love it. The word loving. Keep gazing, which is almost a secondary meaning of contemplata, a gaze, a persistent looking at something else, which I call in the book just this: appreciating and thus recognizing. Looking at it till you can see what's good about it, what's beautiful about it, what's right about it, what doesn't need to be dismissed. Gosh, that is a non-academic description that all of us will spend the rest of our life trying to live up to.
Yeah, because it deals with perception.
Very good.
And
very
I think
good.
the
Yeah.
looking part is like, okay, it shifts how we perceive,
Yeah.
moving us away
you.
from that kind of reactionary throwing the baby out with the bathwater that you're talking about, and able to hold the tension a little bit of the both and that you speak to so much.
Yeah. So let's repeat it once more. A long, loving look, I'll give a different word, at what is. Not what I want it to be, not what I think it should be. What is?
Yeah.
What's right in front of you.
And what an invitation to have all of life become practice then.
That's right.
We have these
Very good.
dedicated times of,
Very good.
of contemplative practice, but also what does that look like in family life or civic life? How can we change that perception so that all of our life becomes a practice? And I think that's sometimes what gets lost in contemplative conversations is there's so much focus on the morning sit, which is obviously very important for helping clean that lens and to shift that perception. But the rubber meets the road when we're out in our daily lives.
That's right.